Thanks, Anne-Marie, and good morning, honorable dignitaries, respected delegates, and dear colleagues and friends. I have the pleasure of introducing our third keynote speaker, Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin. Professor Paloma is the 11th Vice Chancellor of the University of Guyana. She is a professor of behavior and strategic communications, noted as a futurist scholar for her work on change in both humans and human systems. Her recent work on the effects of technology on the human life systems is of international interest. Professor Paloma is highly accomplished and decorated scholar. She is the first woman to lead the university in its 63-year history. She is also the first woman to be appointed Vice Chancellor at any university in the Anglophone Caribbean. She is awarded 2 presidential medals in 2012 and in 2015, as well as a City of New York Award for Culture in 2013. In 2014, she was named by the US Embassy in Guyana amongst the top 5 influential women in the country. In 2015, she also became the first woman Caribbean laureate for the excellence in arts and letters, considered the Nobel Prize for the Caribbean. Professor Mohamed has authored over 20 books, and produced 15 films. She currently sits on several governing boards. Professor has become a sought-after futurist thinker, adding to the growing conversation on the impact of technology on future of higher education, work, and humanity. She has taught and still occasionally teaches strategy, communication, health behavior, psychology and research, and ethics. She will be speaking on the topic of education as liberation, thoughts on technology, resilience, and change in open education. Welcome, Professor Paloma Mohamed Martin.
Good morning, everyone. I'm delighted to see so many people here after what I heard was such a wonderful event last night and also on the last day. So thank you very much. I'd like to begin by thanking our colleagues and congratulating them from the University of Botswana, Open University of Botswana, and CAL for inviting me and making me travel so far to see beautiful Botswana. It's a beautiful country with beautiful people, and I'm delighted to be here. I'd also like to thank those people who have been finding medicine for me all morning. Thank you very much. So I'll speak to my presentation. I'm not a person who goes slavishly towards, going through every slide, but I'm assuming that these slides will become available to everyone. So if you wish to have it, please feel free to circulate. So I wanted to say a little bit about Guyana and a little bit about the University of Guyana, because many people in Botswana, since I've arrived, said, I've never heard of that country. But I'd heard of Botswana. So Guyana is in the South America, but it's considered to be part of the Caribbean, just because we are the only English-speaking country in South America. So we're right on the tip, and that's my country right there. We're next to Venezuela, Brazil, Suriname, and the Atlantic Ocean. And it's, if you want to think about our map, it's like I think of it as a woman with a Coca-Cola body, see, very shapely map. And this, of course, at the bottom there is where I am from. So, so you could see the relationship between our continent and Africa, and if you put them together, you'll see they fit very, very well. But of course, we have to fly all around the world to get here. I wish we could fly straight across and I'd be here in 6 hours. So the University of Guyana was created in 1963. It is arguably the first university in the world that was created by a people still colonized. We became independent in 1966, And so we have several campuses. It's an interesting university because we do have like an open system as well as a face-to-face system, but we became more and more online just around COVID and remained that way. So we have campuses across the country, and everywhere, that's our map. We have 10 administrative regions, and everywhere you see a heart, that's where we have a campus. But the main campus is where you see 4. Region 4 is the capital, and that's the oldest campus and where we see most of our students. We have about 12,000 students, nothing compared to the 500,000 I heard yesterday from one of my colleagues in India. That's an amazing number, but it's a big number for us. And this year we go to, in this semester actually, we go to free state-funded education, and so we have a bumper number of people to take care of. And so the open model is helping us to address the really high demand that comes with free state tuition. We have about 75,000 alum, and also we have over 170 programs that we deliver across our campuses. So, if any one of us has ever thought that education was really designed to liberate people, I would be really surprised, especially education that comes out of a particular sets of systems, right? So I will start off from the premise that we have now to consider education that does very different things than it is doing now. Otherwise, we will not be here talking about this. It can, of course, provide economic emancipation. We know that, and this has been kind of what we are considering for most of this conference, so I will not go too much into that. It can, of course, liberate us from other intellectual and other dependencies. It can redeem identities, which is part of what I believe the open system does best, or attempts to. And then it can provide multi-domain agency. So across all kinds of domains, citizens who are educated can actually come into agency and do things for themselves that supposedly they're not able to do otherwise. And then, of course, very important nowadays, freedoms from misinformation and other poor outcomes. So, and this is not a long list. What I propose to do this morning is to talk to you about some of the things that the University of Guyana has done in addition to, in tandem with what I am speaking about, so I could give you examples of what we're trying to do in order to solve some of the problems that we have, and hopefully you'll be able to take something away from there. So, we also know that technologies are interest invested. People do not spend time and energy doing anything that does not benefit them, that does not require some kind of investment. And for the technologies that we are talking about, they require huge investment, and they also, of course, involve quite a number of things. If you ask most people in the world what their purpose is or what they want to do, they don't know. And this, of course, is antithetical to how technologies function, because they technically know most of the time what exactly it is that they're trying to accomplish, and then, of course, there are other things that don't happen. I've created very quickly about 20 items that I'd like to go through with you, and to give examples very quickly about what it is that the University of Guyana has been doing, right? So we have technology in the interest of owners and controllers of those technologies. And one of the things that concerns me most about our part of the region, of the world, and our systems is that we don't own or control any of the technologies that we seek to employ. Last few days, we get hooked into these technologies, and then the prices go up incrementally every year. Or otherwise, we're using open source technologies which compromise many things, including our information and so on. Of course, the question here is, what exactly do we want out of technology? And one of the things about open education is that while we are being facilitated by a lot of educational technologies, which I won't go into because you had a beautiful keynote yesterday about this, we also are competing against many, 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 many other possibilities that are online, including people who are on TikTok, people who are on social media, people who are just popping up out of the ether and are being chosen by people who are young as their preferred means of being educated. And I'll come back to that in a second because that is problematic. So, question, is there a role for TikTok and social media in education? You know, if anybody in the room who has a young person in their lives, like a son, a daughter, nephew, you recognize who gets them to read. People, they see something on TikTok, you say, where did you get that book? How did you know about that book? And they say, oh, this influencer is reading this book or something. This is a very important point. We can't be social media snobs in education. We have to think about how it is that we can employ these technologies or these channels to support what we want to do in education. I'll come back to that in a minute. So we have to consider, of course, restructuring the content because, again, we've been talking about how artificial intelligence and I, so that's an I and I, the person, how we work together. And one of the things that we also have to consider in our work is if we really want open education, are we employing open tactics and are we open leaders? I am going to come back to the question of open leadership in a minute because I think it's an important part of our conversation that we're not suggesting. We also have to consider the ecology of the learner, that the learner is, for us, should be considered not in an isolated place of higher, lower, middle, or nursery education, but embedded in a social context. And when you are embedded in a social context, it therefore means that you have many opportunities. So when we talk about sustainability, we have to think about that ecological context and see the opportunities at every single point, every single domain and level. So for instance, many countries in the world, especially in our countries where we serve, are interested in a couple of things: youth violence, domestic violence, interpersonal violence, gender issues, and so on. And is it that we have to start thinking of education and training and programs and courses that speak specifically to social issues in addition to the issues of training for employment, etc., and entrepreneurship? This is, I think, an area that we need to start considering because governments, which many of our universities are beholden to, are interested in these matters, and I think there's a niche for us, and those things are not going to go away tomorrow. Unfortunately, we wish they would. So the question of how we address those things and the opportunity is also something. Okay, so these are the 20 things I wanted to talk about. So inclusivity, one of the things that is on the minds of many people is, how inclusive is inclusive? So for instance, in a conference like this, right, I'm looking for the young people. I'm looking for how many young people are in these rooms, and not only this conference, any conference I go to, I look for them. And I say to myself, which is what we have to speak about, if these voices are not included in the conversation, and we're designing for them and they're not there, then we have a problem. And so not only inclusive for young people, inclusive for business, inclusive for the elderly. We talk about lifelong education, but not education for life. And if you consider this, education for life, very different paradigm, rather than where you are along your life's journey, right? So everything about life, can we educate for that? And how do we do that? And that's only by listening to people. Speaking into the silence, this is a very important aspect of what we're doing, and I think open education is excellent for this, but we have to do more. What is the silence I'm speaking about? If you open your phones at any time and you Google anybody in this room, many of you are important voices in your communities, but you will not see a single quotation from you. One of the things I say is that, if you're looking for a quote on education, on something, you will probably see a quotation much faster from a dead president in 18-something from some country that, we have no nexus with. But you will not see the voices of your own people represented in the same way as your numbers certainly on AI, Google, or any of these search engines. And this is a problem because if we're going to use these technologies for our own research, for writing, for understanding life, the representation for us is not there. So we really do need to publish and to write and to put our voices and material out there and to make sure that when we have these industries and we have these opportunities, that we are doing what is necessary so that our perspective, our culture, our heritage, and our science and knowledge is also represented. So speaking into the silence, that's what I mean. And in that regard, I'd really like to thank and applaud the university, or the Mauritians, for what they did yesterday, because I think that's a very wonderful initiative. It also is, of course, wonderful that Dean and company are putting this on social media. I think it's a very important step that you've taken to kind of systematize and publicize a conference like this in a space like social media. So we're beginning to kind of act. Avoid the polls. So a lot of times, we think of, open education and traditional education as poles, but many of us have, a synergistic view and approach to it. Like I said, the University of Guyana does have both, and this is something that we have to consider, and avoiding the polls for everything. Turning collaboration into synergy, very, very significant thing, and in this room, we can start by doing very simple things, make sure that you give somebody your WhatsApp address, but synergy means a much deeper collaboration, a much deeper relationship. So for instance, the last time we were in a conference like this in Mauritius, I started a conversation with some of my colleagues from some of the universities about what I called, international composite degrees. What's an international composite degree in my head, at least in my head? An international composite degree is one degree, so we were trying to work on a PhD in business because we really needed to have that. I wanted that at the university, and many of our colleagues had this already. The idea was for 4 or 3 universities to come together and teach this one program with students from all around the world. Each one would teach to their strengths. The modules would be either equally distributed or not, depending on the strengths, and that all 3 universities would then accredit and give the certificate. We've been doing this in the Caribbean with the University of Trinidad and Tobago for some of the things that they're teaching. Now, people think that this is a difficult thing to do because of the different hurdles that you have to cross. But you know what? Anything's good it's worth fighting for. And one of the things that this does is helps us to actually have variants of experiences, but also to share resources, and our students have a much richer and international experience. So that's only one way, but we need to really be able to really collaborate at a much more integral level rather than just exchange information now. And I think that's something for us to think about. To be nimble, we need to be really, really fast. about what we do, because the academy tends to have these processes which are important for quality control, but we really do need to be much faster and quicker in what we do. And the way I do this at the University of Guyana is that I set up task forces. So we don't skip the processes, you can't, but I set up task forces on various things so that we can move very quickly. We give them a timeline. The timeline is not usually adhered to, it's an aggressive one, but at least it doesn't take 2 years or 3 years to get a program through, maybe 6 months or so. And it helps if you're sitting as head of these committees, but really and truly we have to be much more nimble. And here's the reason why. Everything is changing around us so quickly. So if you're gonna take 2 years or 3 years to develop something, it means that content and that knowledge and that need might actually surpass you. And there are private universities and other entities who show up and say, okay, we can do this in three months or something. Now, of course, we don't know the quality, but who cares about the quality if they can get it in time? So education, the comfort zones that we're in, we have to abolish them. One of the things that I am thinking about, and I know this is way out there, but that's what I do. I think way into the future. And one of the things I am considering is whether or not we're looking at the end of education as we know it, the beginning of the end of education as we know it. The structures that we are looking at and that we are functioning in are being constantly rejected by those that we are trying to teach. And this is a fundamental thing that we have to address. Because people want quick, they want plug and play, they want immediate, they want earn as you learn, they want to be able to choose what I call the designer degrees, which we've allowed some people in the University of Guyana to do now. So for instance, we have medical doctors at the university who want to do business, right? So our College of Medical Sciences has opened up the possibility for electives in our business school. And what we're seeing in this at the university is a number of persons who we expected to go to practice as doctors are now opening medical businesses with others. So you have all of this kind of what I call agency in education that we have to cater to, because the student is no longer only interested in being passively poked into whatever hole or whatever stream that we decide we want them to go into. I've talked about education for living already, so I'm not going to go there again. So the ecology of endeavor, that's what I mean. So do people want to do whatever they want to do? My personal feeling on this is that the jobs of the future are not known by any of us. We are not able to predict well. We can predict what industry tells us, but we can't predict what the vast number of our students have in their hearts and their minds, the opportunities that they see. And I believe the best way to address this is to allow them to design what they feel they want to do, of course with some controls. So that's what I call the ecology of endeavor, but also what I call total domain inclusivity. And that is that we function with business. We have to find a way to function and create relationships with governments, with our own universities around the world, which is great for happening now, with our community groups, with our religious groups, and certainly with our youth groups, definitely with youths and so on, because they know either instinctively or their minds are living in the future that we also cannot clearly see. So also, well, I've talked about avoiding social media snobbery. Many of us, including me, I have to say, before I listened to my son one morning talk with his friends, and then I thought, this might be a very good channel for making sure that some of the information that we want to get out there and the structure of how they want to be taught is to be considered. One of the things we also have to think about, because open universities are so dependent on technologies, is what if the technology fails? What if technology fails one day in the future? how are we going to continue doing our work? And this is a very important consideration for many of us. Are we going to go back to mailing? What are we going to do? So one of the things that the University of Guyana has been doing is to make sure that we have at least a hub. Now, countries that are huge, like India, etc., and Africa, maybe can't do that. But we do have a physical hub in each one of our regions so that there is a server that's there in case on which it does happen. Technology fails us, at least we have backup systems 1 and 2. And then also other things. One of the things we have to consider also is redefining the role of the educator. One of the most important things that social media and virtuality, online education has taught us is that the stance of the person who is lecturing, and of course open education is the first, I think, to have undermined this, as God is pouring into the student is different. It's no longer the same as we used to have it. And so what is the role of the educator now? Is it a navigator of all this content that's out there that we can't, we have to be able to guide our students through? Is it as a collaborator, I think, more and more? And we have to also consider who and why we're educating. I go back to the initial question that I asked. If we ever thought that education was actually designed in the first instance, the education we know, to liberate anyone, I think that that would be a really serious problem. It was not. It was designed to create people to work in industries. It was designed as social control mechanisms, and it was designed to make sure that what we thought, when I say we, those who were designing it, was necessary for people to do and learn and to be, was what they were going to do and learn and be. But I think we now have to turn that on its head because the young people among us are turning that on its head. So this is a survey that we did in the University of Guyana that is speaks to some of the things that, you know, what's happening. So we want adaptability. That's what the young people are telling us in our part of the world. They want accessibility. We know that. They want affordability. We also know that. They want to earn as they learn, and this is where the link with businesses and government and links with students among themselves, because they can get together and do their businesses and do their work. They want speed. And this is one thing that I go back to how, for instance, TikTok gets people to stay for hours, mind you. They get people to stay for hours. You don't realize it just going through one of those, you know, short things, short slides and presentations, one after the other, but you're there for hours. And maybe conceptually difficult thing for us to wrap our heads around now because we are used to long form. But it might be an interesting experiment for somebody to see how we can break our lessons down into bits and get them to be linked like this and get people to pay attention to them as they go through their day and not sitting in a class all the time, right? They want them to be micro and modular, very important in that conversation. CALL is advancing, as many others, and as CXC is in the Caribbean. And they want practical and applied. And so this is a challenge for open education, of course, because most of our education is not practical and applied. But the links, as I say, with industry, with community, with what students want to learn themselves. Relevancy, flexibility, value for money, whether it's cost or free. And they want to do their designer degrees. They want funding. For enterprises, and so here we can look at linking with banks, for instance, and microfinancing, because if we go back to the student and the learner as embedded in a particular context, then we should be able to find ways of helping them to finance their entrepreneurial work that they want to do, because everybody is not going to find a job in the world we're emerging into. If we go back and think about what automation, robotics, and all of these things are going to mean in the very near future to certain types of jobs and possibilities, then we have to think about entrepreneurship and enabling people to make their own living and to do what they want to do. The other thing that we need to consider is the domain. Come back to this thing about domain. Right now, a lot of our education is based on what is on Earth, the Earth that we know, right? That's changing every day. But a lot of the work that is going to be work of the future, unfortunately, or fortunately, I don't know, is going to be work that's already begun under Earth. That means under Earth, under the water, a domain that is not considered very significantly in now, and of course off Earth. I'm not going to go there, but I'm just putting that out there because it is absolutely factual that this is happening, and we are all focusing on what's going to be, what's to happen here and now. But there's a whole other world out there that is going very fast, and we have to consider if there is a space for us in education and what we're doing in that era. So now, last few things. The University of Guyana, a couple of years ago, I led a process as the Deputy Vice Chancellor, a blueprinting process. We have a blueprint that goes to 20 years. So it started in 2040. When I talk about inclusivity, what I mean is that I called together in 2017 and 2018 and 2019, just said one day, guys, the country's going to change. We just found oil. We knew it was going to change. The University of Guyana had to radically shift what it was doing. Does anybody want to come and talk about how the university can be relevant in this regard? And so I just opened a hall and said anybody who wants to come and talk about this can come. I invited everyone, youth groups, students, cleaners in the university, anybody who wanted to come. We started with 17 people. By the end of the process, we had over 400 people in the room. I would do this on Thursdays and Fridays once a month. And we came up with a beautiful document. I think it's beautiful, and we've been working it, called our Blueprint to 2040. We came up with 4 aspirational goals. And I think the first one is very relevant to open education, and it has found resonance with many people across the world, governments. And the first aspirational goal that we said, we wanted at least 1 graduate per household. If you go back to the liberating influence of education, or the possibilities of how education can touch lives, we felt that if we had at least 1 graduate per household in the university, in the country, then they could serve as a model, as an engine of economic empowerment for their families and for the communities, and of course they could contribute to national life. Of course, unpacking that alone is big, and that this presentation is not about that, but I just wanted to say that here we are, and this is part of the online education that we began to do, is helping us to do this. The other 3 aspirational goals were to be, we chose 9 niches of where the University of Guyana was going to focus, where we had strengths and some we didn't have strengths, so we needed to develop those. And of course, we wanted to be a center of excellence for solving some grand challenges of our own country, the region in which we found ourselves, and the world. And finally, very important to this question of leadership and modeling and what we do in the academy as ourselves, our own selves, right? Because we don't always think of ourselves as the first teachers, right? Whatever we do, however we present, that's how people see the academy that we represent. We wanted to be a model for the nation, and we also wanted to make sure that we were creating graduates who were fit for purpose. And in that, we articulated that we wanted to not create only students who were successful, but the ultimate goal of the academy is to ensure that we create people, citizens who can succeed anywhere. And that's a very different paradigm because, again, we are often very interested in making sure we have the numbers graduating on time. But if you are concerned about creating citizens who succeed and successful citizens, then wherever they are in the world, whenever they are, well, after they graduate, you care about that. And of course, that's a real stretch for the academy, but this is what we need to do. And those persons could then give back. So the question of sustainability and your alum, many of us have persons who've done very well in their lives, and we just leave them, right? We need to find them so they can give their experiences back, give back to the academy, and also help us. So that's what we did at UG. And so this is talking about inclusivity. This is a 72-year-old lady who graduated in 2023. We do have persons who are, this is the beauty of, open education, who are everywhere. And she's not the last, because we have some others who she inspired. And this also is a person who is in a wheelchair you can't see, who is part of our graduating class. She's an accountant now. And of course, this goes through the logic of why we said we wanted at least one graduate per household. I'm not going to go through it. The slides are there. But in case you're interested in unpacking that, please feel free to request the presentation, and you can get that. Now, there are a couple of others. There are two or three other things I wanted to point to that the University of Guyana is doing. And one of them is the pedagogy and writing about how to do important things like science, for instance, in low income or low cost economies, right? So I have these colleagues who wrote this book on teaching science, right? In countries and in conditions where you have you don't have a lot of resources. And then, of course, the history of science and technology in the country by one of our old professors. And he also speaks about how they developed a whole industry in the country around very little resources, but the brain power that's there is powerful, right? So that's our best resource, always the brain. Also wanted to talk about this particular strategy that we use. We employed in our country and the university a couple of years ago, called the Policy for Underserved Communities. And this is because when we looked at our data in the university, we noticed that we had some groups that were really, really underrepresented. So the indigenous communities, we had women, we had those that were in, inland, because we're coastal. We were coastal very much at that time. And so we created a policy whereby if you are from those communities, even though your grades might be lower than others, so we had two ranking systems, one for if you're in these communities and one for if you're in others. You had to be eligible, but you could still get into the university. And that's part of how we deal with gender, with indigenous communities, etc., by creating policy that allows and opens up the spaces for persons who we saw in our data that were underrepresented. So this is my pride and joy. This is our newest campus that is being created now. This is Makatao campus, the Forest campus. It is a very special place because it is one of the first universities in the world that is being created on indigenous protected lands. So it is being co-created by the community of Aishalton. It serves 21 indigenous communities, and this campus is 2.5 hours flying from where my main campus is. It actually is 10 minutes from the Brazilian border. It's closer to Brazil than it is to the University of Guyana in town, but we are doing this, and the indigenous community is actually co-creating the campus with us, it is just a very fascinating process, which of course I could speak about all day, but I'm about to end this presentation because I'm out of time. But again, here is the question of the inclusivity, of innovation, of making sure that all voices and that our education is serving everyone. The way in which this campus is emerging is that they're telling us what they need, and we are responding. We are restructuring our curricula to meet their, the community cycle, because there are times when they go off and they have to do their farming or fishing or whatever they do, and so we have to redesign the structure. Of course, electricity at the moment is a challenge, and internet is a challenge. So that's what I'm talking about in terms of what happens when the technology is not there or it fails. But we can't say because it's not there that we are not going to do something about it, because there are technologies and there are other things that we can do to make sure that communities still have access. So the last thing I wanted to talk about is, how we're responding to AI and technologies as well. Because the University of Guyana was one of the first universities in the world to create an AI policy when ChatGPT first came out. And again, I go back to the question of speaking into the silence of inclusivity, of responsiveness and nimbleness. Of course, we didn't know what we were seeing, and we didn't have any clue at that point in time exactly what was going to be happening, right? But what happened was this. We received a few letters from lawyers, from our students, because the lecturers were giving 0. They were treating this as plagiarism. And students were saying to us, well, you don't have anything about the use of ChatGPT or anything AI in your policy, so how could you say we can't use it? So I said, okay, fine, same technique again. I'm having a big town hall meeting. Anybody who wants to come and talk about this, please come. 400 people, 8 hours later. We had a transcript of a meeting in which the students had their say, our technologists had their say, and of course the lecturers who had a lot to say about it. And I handed it over to my policy team. They looked around the world to see what was going on. They tried to predict, and we had a first draft, brought it back to our academic board, and we employed it. And of course, it's being reiterated every year since then. What it tried to do was not only address the question of the gap in our policies, which of course I think was every university in the world, that we had now to cater for this in the university regulations and what was plagiarism, what was not. But also we tried to deal with several issues, and one of those issues was, some students would have access to this, some students would have access to the open, and some students would have access to the ones that you pay for it, which can do a number of things. And so we tried to address also this disparity in assessments. We tried to have a rubric. We tried to say, this is how you need to use it responsibly. And I'd like to say that anybody who's interested in looking at it, because I know a lot of people are looking at these policies now, please feel free. We've shared this freely and we've benefited also from feedback from others as we try to strengthen what we do. We also are experimenting with Alpha, our own virtual immersive gaming technologies for teaching, especially mathematics, and for skills training in places where we have a lot of out-of-school youth, people who have been out of school, who dropped out of school, but who are always gaming. And we feel that this is a very significant group of people that we have to try to bring back into the education ecology, the space, and so we are using this to try to see if it will work to bring them back in, to get them interested again. And of course, as I mentioned somewhere someday, I don't remember, we do have a master's in artificial intelligence that we are offering. We offer scholarships. It's completely online, so anybody who's interested in this, because the training is important, not only on the front end. I speak about open leadership in open education, because you also have to be open to new things, new thinking, and not only focus on the front end, which is the academics, the faculty, and the teaching and the students. All those systems in the back end that support education, so human resources, maintenance, security, the bursary, the back end. All of these need to be trained up and brought into synergy with what we're trying to do on the front end as well. And a lot of times we don't spend the energy and resources on these, so it's very important for us to do that. I think I've come to the end of, hopefully I haven't overstayed my time. I've come to the end of my presentation. The contact information is there. Please feel free if I have left anything, any question in your mind open to ask me. Just wanted to say, ladies and gentlemen, that I do want to reiterate that we are, I believe, at the cusp of a very significant sea change in education, not only in regards to technology, but in terms of the populations that we have to serve and the changes in socio-political and, of course, environmental and other contexts that we find ourselves in. And so we cannot be afraid to confront these issues and to think boldly. Anyone in this room who is a leader, who a director, a vice chancellor, has to not be timid in these times. You have to be intrepid, courageous, and very brave, but also thoughtful. And one of the things that universities do have or should have is a lot of data about themselves. And if we are really conscientious about mining that data, not only to understand ourselves, but understand the trends, the patterns of how we've operated in the past and kind of to try to help to predict how we can operate in the future, I think we'll be successful. Sustainability really is about usefulness. And once we find that sweet spot of usefulness, not only to who we teach, but to the societies that we serve, the governments that we serve, the societies, the world that we serve, I believe that we will be sustainable, we will be successful, and we will do what we are all, I guess, passionate about, which is lifting people up and making the best out of people and best of the world that we serve. I thank you.